Okay, today we're going to talk about how to figure out how much fabric you need to buy for your borders. And you have to do the math. So we're going to do a little bit of math today. I know it sounds hard, but it really isn't. So what we're going to do is I just read in a book the other day, and I've read this many times, that when you figure out how big to cut your border pieces, you measure the middle of your quilt and figure out how big that is. I don't measure my quilt at all because I already know that how big my blocks are because I've squared them up as I've gone and I know how big they are. So we're going to pretend like my blocks are 12 inches. And so we're going to take 12 inches times 5, and that will give us 60 inches. So this side is 60 inches, and across we've got 4 blocks times 12, and so that's 48 inches. And so do the math and figure out how big your quilt is. Now if you've got some other fabric in here for your sashing, then just figure out your blocks, and then figure out if I had 2-inch sashing here, then that's 4 times 2, so I'd just add 8 inches onto here. And of course you have to add a half an inch. But for our figuring, we probably won't do that right now. So now we have our 60 inches that we know, and another 60 inches because we're going to have one here and one here. Now we have to decide how wide we're going to cut them, and I want them 4 inches finished. And you always sew on the side ones first. It just is a better looking. It is easier on the eye for some reason. It's more aesthetically pleasing. So we're going to cut those, and they're going to be 60 and a half actually, but we're going to just use 60 for our figuring here. And so that's 120. Now we have 48 plus 4 and plus 4, and so that's 56 and 56, and so that's 112. So we're going to add the 112. See, this is easy math. So that's how many inches around are for our border, because we're going to sew our border piece on up here after. Okay, so now we have to figure out how many strips across from selvage to selvage we're going to cut. And so we take 40 into that, because 40 is about the width of the fabric. And so 40 into that will go 5.8, because 5 will be 20, and then 32, and 4 will go into 328 times. So we're going to round it up to 6 strips. You always have to round it up to the next biggest strip. So we're going to have 6 strips that are cut 4.5 inches, because I want it 4 finished. 4.5 times 6 is 27 inches. So we're going to need 27 inches for this border here. And that's 3/4 of a yard, so I would round it up to the next eighth, and I would probably buy 7/8 of a yard for that border. I know math is scary to some of you, and I know people who just take a strip, just sew all your strips together, and then sew them on, and don't measure, but you won't get a square quilt that way, because this side will end up being bigger than this, or whichever. But if you want a quilt that's square, then I would do this, and then you'd cut your 6 strips, you'd sew them together end to end, and then you'd cut 2 strips that are 60.5 and 2 strips that are 56.5 for the top and bottom, and then you'd sew the side ones on, press it to the border, and then sew the top and bottom ones on and press it to the border. And if you want to add another border, you can do that as many times as you want. You can do that, but this is how you figure out how much fabric you're going to need. Just add them up, divide it by 40, and then it'll tell you how many strips you need, and times it by the width of your strip, and you get the amount of fabric you're going to need for your border. I had a lady tell me she always buys 3/4 of a yard for her borders, no matter how big her quilt is, and I'm going, well, then she might have really skinny borders sometimes. So this is a good way to figure, do a little math, and your quilt will be square. Good luck.